Okay, so we might have some messages this morning, perhaps not. Fantastic, no messages? Good-o. We can get right onto the topic. So, the topic today is how to enjoy moose. No, it's not. That would be musawada if I meant it. It's progress via failure. So I've got a sutta here. I usually try to get a sutta, the Buddha's speech or the Buddha's teaching, the suttas. I try to use a sutta to highlight certain aspects or teachings. So let's make a start today. Today's sutta is Majjhima, from the Majjhima Nikaya, which means middle-length discourses of the Buddha. And this is number 86, which is the Angulimala Sutta. Angulimala being a character of ill repute at the beginning and good repute at the end. So let's make a start on this one. Homage to him, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. Homage to him, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. Homage to him, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove and under Pindika's Park. Now on that occasion there was a bandit in the realm of King Pasenadi of Kosala named Angulimala, who was murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Villages, towns and districts were laid waste by him. He was constantly murdering people and he wore their fingers as a garland. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed and taking his bowl and outer robe went into Savatthi for alms. When he had wandered for alms in Savatthi and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he set his resting place in order, and taking his bowl and outer robe, set out on the road leading towards Angulimala. Cowherds, shepherds, ploughmen and travellers saw the Blessed One walking along the road, leading towards Angulimala, and told him, "Do not take this road, recluse. On this road is the bandit Angulimala, who is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Villages, towns and districts have been laid waste by him. He is constantly murdering people and he wears their fingers as a garland. Men have come along this road in groups of 10, 20, 30, even 40, but they still have fallen into Angulimala's hands." When this was said, the Blessed One went on in silence. For the second time, for the third time, the cowherds, shepherds and ploughmen warned him about this, but still the Blessed One went on in silence. The bandit Angulimala saw the Blessed One coming in the distance. When he saw him, he thought, "It is wonderful, it is marvellous. Men have come along this road in groups of 10, 20, 30 and even 40, but still they have fallen into my hands. But now this recluse comes alone, unaccompanied, as if forcing his way. Why shouldn't I take this recluse's life?" Angulimala then took up his sword and shield, buckled on his bow and quiver, and followed close behind the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One performed such a feat of supernormal power that the bandit Angulimala, though running as fast as he could not catch up with the Blessed One, who was walking at his normal pace. And the bandit Angulimala thought, "It is wonderful, it is marvellous. Formerly I could catch up even with a swift elephant and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift horse and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift chariot and seize it. I could catch up even with a swift deer and seize it. But now, though I am running as fast as I cannot catch up with this recluse, who is walking at his normal pace." He stopped and he called out to the Blessed One, "Stop, recluse, stop!" "I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too." Then the bandit Angulimala thought, "These recluses, sons of the Sakyans, speak truth, assert truth, but though this recluse is still walking, he says, 'I have stopped, Angulimala. You stop too. Suppose I question this recluse.'" Then the bandit Angulimala addressed the Blessed One in stanzas thus: "While you are walking, recluse, you tell me you have stopped. But now, when I have stopped, you say, I have not stopped. I ask you now, O recluse, about the meaning. How is it that you have stopped and I have not?" "Angulimala, I have stopped forever. I abstain from violence towards living beings, but you have no restraint towards things that live. That is why I have stopped you. That's why I have stopped and you have not. Oh, at long last, this recluse, a venerated sage, has come to this great forest for my sake. Having heard your stanza teaching me the Dhamma, I will indeed renounce evil forever. So saying, the bandit took his sword and weapons, flung them into a gaping chasm's pit. The bandit worshipped the Sublime One's feet, and then, there and then asked for the going forth. The Enlightened One, the sage of great compassion, the teacher of the world with all of its gods, addressed him with these words, "Come, monk." And that was how he came to be a monk. Then the Blessed One set out to wander back to Savatthi with Angulimala as his attendant. Wandering by stages, he eventually arrived at Savatthi, and there he lived at Savatthi in Jetta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion, great crowds of people were gathering at the gates of King Pasenadi's inner palace, very loud and noisy, crying, "Sire, the bandit Angulimala is in your realm. He is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Villages, towns and districts have been laid waste by him. He is constantly murdering people and he wears their fingers as a garland. The king must put him down." Then in the middle of the day, King Pasenadi of Kosala drove out of Savatthi with a cavalry of 500 men and set out for the park. He drove thus as far as the road was passable for carriages, and then he dismounted from his carriage and went forward on foot to the Blessed One. After paying homage to the Blessed One, he sat down to one side, and the Blessed One said to him, "What is it, great king? Is King Senia Bimbisara of Magadha attacking you, or the Lichavis of Vesali, or other hostile kings?" "Venerable Sir, King Senia Bimbisara of Magadha is not attacking me, nor the Lichavis of Vesali, nor are other hostile kings. But there is a bandit in my realm named Angulimala, who is murderous and bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. Villages, towns and districts have been laid waste by him. He's constantly murdering people and wears their fingers as a garland. I shall put him down, Venerable Sir." "Great King, suppose you were to see that Angulimala had shaved off his hair and beard, put on a yellow robe and had gone forth from the home life into homelessness, that he was abstaining from killing living beings, from taking what is not given and from false speech, that he was eating only one meal a day and he was celibate, virtuous, of good character. If you were to see him thus, how would you treat him?" "Venerable Sir, we would pay homage to him, or rise up for him, or invite him to be seated, or we would invite him to accept robes, food, a resting place, or medicines, or we would arrange for him lawful guarding, defence and protection. But, Venerable Sir, how could such an immoral man, one of evil character, ever have such virtue and restraint?" Now on that occasion the Venerable Angulimala was sitting not far from the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One extended his right arm and he said to King Pasenadi of Kosala, "Great King, this is Angulimala." Then King Pasenadi was frightened, alarmed and terrified. Knowing this, the Blessed One told him, "Do not be afraid, great King, do not be afraid. There is nothing for you to fear from him." Then the king's fear, alarm and terror subsided. He went over to the Venerable Angulimala and said, "Venerable Sir, is the noble Lord really Angulimala?" "Yes, great King." "Venerable Sir, of what family is the noble Lord's father? Or what family is his mother?" "My father is Gaga, great King. My mother is Mantani." "Well, let the noble Lord Gaga Mantani Putta rest content. I shall provide robes, alms, food, resting place and medicines for the noble Lord." Now at that time the Venerable Angulimala was a forest dweller, an alms food eater, a refuse rag wearer, and restricted himself to 3 robes. He replied, "Enough, great King, my 3 robes are complete." King Pasenadi then returned to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and said, "It is wonderful, Venerable Sir, it is marvellous how the Blessed One tames the untamed, brings peace to the unpeaceful, and leads to Nibbana those who have not attained Nibbana. Venerable Sir, we ourselves could not tame him with force and weapons. Yet the Blessed One has tamed him without force or weapons. And now, Venerable Sir, we depart. We are busy and we have much to do. You may go, great King, at your own convenience. Then King Pasenadi of Kosala rose from his seat, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, keeping him on his right, he departed. Then, when it was morning, the Venerable Angulimala dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. As he was wandering for alms from house to house in Savatthi, he saw a certain woman in difficult labour, in painful labour. When he saw this, he thought, how beings are afflicted! Indeed, how beings are afflicted! When he had wandered for alms in Savatthi and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down to one side and said, Venerable Sir, in the morning I dressed, and taking my bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. As I was wandering for alms from house to house in Savatthi, I saw a certain woman in difficult labour, in painful labour. When I saw that, I thought, how beings are afflicted! Indeed, how beings are afflicted! In that case, Angulimala, go into Savatthi and say to that woman, Sister, since I was born, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. But Venerable Sir, wouldn't I be telling a deliberate lie? For I have intentionally deprived many living beings of life. Then Angulimala, go into Savatthi and say to that woman, Sister, since I was born with the noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. Yes, Venerable Sir, the Venerable Angulimala replied, and having gone into Savatthi, he told that woman, Sister, since I was born with the noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. And by this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. Then the woman and the infant became well. But before long, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent and resolute, the Venerable Angulimala, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, here and now entered upon and abided in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. He directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming to any state of being. And the Venerable Angulimala became one of the Arahants. Then when it was morning, the Venerable Angulimala dressed, and taking his bow and outer robe, went into Savatthi, a bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. Now on that occasion, someone threw a clod and hit the Venerable Angulimala's body. Someone else threw a stick and hit his body. Someone else threw a pot shed and hit his body. Then with blood running from his cut head, with his bowl broken, and with his outer robe torn, the Venerable Angulimala went to the Blessed One. The Blessed One saw him coming in the distance and told him, Bear it, Brahman, bear it, Brahman. You are experiencing here and now the result of deeds because of which you might have been tortured in hell for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years. Then, while the Venerable Angulimala was alone in retreat, experiencing the bliss of deliverance, he uttered this exclamation, Who once did live in negligence, and then is negligent no more, he illuminates this world like the moon freed from the cloud. Who checks the evil deeds he did by doing wholesome deeds instead, he illuminates this world like the moon freed from a cloud. The youthful monk who devotes his efforts to the Buddha's teaching, he illuminates this world like the moon freed from a cloud. Let my enemies hear discourse on the Dhamma. Let them be devoted to the Buddha's teaching. Let my enemies wait on these good people who lead others to accept the Dhamma. Let my enemies give ear from time to time and hear the Dhamma of those who preach forbearance, of those who speak as well in praise of kindness, and let them follow up with kind deeds, for surely then they would not wish to harm me, nor would they think of harming other beings. So those who would protect all, frail or strong, let them attain the all-surpassing peace. Conduit makers guide the water, fletchers straighten out the arrow shaft, carpenters straighten out the timber, but wise men seek to tame themselves. There are some that tame with beatings, some with goads and some with whips, but I was tamed by such a one who has no rod nor any weapon. Harmless is the name I bear. Though I was dangerous in the past, the name I bear today is true. I hurt no living being at all. And though I once lived as a bandit, known to all as Finger Garland, one whom the great flood swept along, I went for refuge to the Buddha. And though I once was bloody-handed with the name of Finger Garland, see the refuge I have found. The bond of being has been cut. While I did many deeds that led to the rebirth in the evil realms, yet the result has now reached me. And so I eat free from debt. There are fools and have no sense, who give themselves to negligence. But those of wisdom guard diligence and treat it as their greatest good. Do not give way to negligence, nor seek delight in sensual pleasures, but meditate with diligence, so as to reach the perfect bliss. So welcome to that choice of mine, and let it stand. It was not ill made. Of all the teachings resorted to, I have come to the very best. So welcome to that choice of mine, and let it stand. It was not ill made. I have attained the triple knowledge and done all that the Buddha teaches. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It's a bit of an epic story. Probably one of the most important things when we see the teachings from the Buddha is to try to find the key points within any teaching. What is the Buddha trying to tell us in each particular sutta, with each particular teaching that he's giving? And you might find a lot of crossover themes. But in this particular one, I think the greatest theme prevalent is actually about impermanence. It is about change. Angulimala having a reputation for being a mass murderer and going around and just killing whoever he felt like killing. So we've got a character who is in that kind of frame of mind, changing from that frame of mind to one of becoming a monk. And eventually an arahant, fully enlightened, freed from anger, free from greed, free from delusion. How is it possible that somebody can go from that extreme to another extreme? Going from ice to fire. How is that possible? And the only way that this is possible is through change. Through that concept that the Buddha keeps teaching us about in the suttas of impermanence. It is indeed because we don't understand impermanence, we ignore it. If we do know about it, we tend to ignore it. We think, I have so much time on my hands. I can just do this, that and the other, and fritter away the hours in an offhand kind of way. Some of us pay more attention to this. You look into the mirror and you see another grey hair coming. Those, of course, who are young, who are younger, they don't see the grey hairs yet. Although even they will acknowledge, maybe year after year, things are changing. As an infant, prone on the ground, unable to walk, unable to run, then after a few years, they're sticking forks in PowerPoint. They're going everywhere where you don't want them to go, having little adventures that you would rather see them not have. But this is also the nature of change, but for children, maybe they don't pay too much attention to this. It's almost as if we wait until we can get our driver's license, and time is so slow before then. It's so slow. Oh, how I want my independence from my parents, how I'd like to go drive here or drive there, travel overseas, have all these experiences. But then after you get your license, after you're able to drink legally in pubs and clubs, it's almost as if the accelerator starts to hit the floor. That sense of time starts to just fly by. And then it just seems that the years just melt away, but in a blurry kind of way. Year after year, there doesn't seem to be much changing, but there is change nevertheless. In this story here, we see somebody who although being a mass murderer could change, and did change. Although many people were, I would imagine, quite upset with him. You know, if you'd killed my father, my mother, or my brother, my sister, my friends, people I knew in the village, yes, of course there'd be a tendency, if that happened to you, that you would be quite upset with whoever this person was. You would want revenge. Most people would like the idea of justice. Justice meaning, you know, harming another person. If you think about it carefully, justice and fairness are two different concepts. We don't have a fairness system, but we do have a justice system. If you had a fairness system, you would both get equal representation. You would both get high-priced lawyers with Armani suits. But that's the fairness system, it's not the justice system. Justice system means you might end up representing yourself. It's not fairness, it's justice. Right? It's got to be seen to be done, but not necessarily fairness to be done. So in these situations, you look at these situations, you think, I would really like for this guy to die. Because that solves all the problems, right? When you kill people, the problem goes away. This person's a murderer, so when you kill them, put them in an electric chair, hang them, give them a lethal dose of something or another. That fixes the problem, right? Because nobody else will ever do that, right? Seeing that example. Is that how it works? No. All you're doing is you're showing the example of what they were doing. To get rid of murder, we murder. It's actually it's not counterintuitive, it is intuitive, but it is counter wisdom, maybe. Contra to wisdom. Surely if you want a society where you feel peaceful, you feel protected, wouldn't you want an example of peace or tolerance or patience? If somebody is a criminal of that extent, do you think that killing them sets the right example? Is that not a sign of a lack of compassion? We say, this is wrong to do. You're killing somebody, this is wrong to do. But out of great compassion, we will kill you. After a lengthy prison sentence, of course, for great compassion. Because everybody knows when you harm another person, it only makes them feel better. Sorry, that was sarcasm. Who wants to be harmed? Apart from the person who's very young at the front row. Very few people I know enjoy a lot of suffering. I'm particularly not partial to it. I don't imagine many people are of right mind, like suffering, like pain. So we need to set the right example. In this case, Angulimala could have easily have kept on going with murdering and killing. He didn't have to change. But even for somebody like this, he saw the opportunity. There's a holy person walking along the road, and initially he wanted to kill him, granted. But then when he couldn't kill him, he wanted to ask the question, what does this person have that might help me? Even this little part, this change, allowing of change to be possible, was the most pivotal point in this whole story. If you're of the belief that things don't change, can't change, just like the king, I find it hard to believe anybody could change. Surely this person needs to be put down. But Angulimala did change. And it's because we maintain the perception that people can't change and circumstances can't change that we find ourselves trapped into this ideology of failure. We get stuck in a rut. We think, my life is going to have to be like this. This person, person A, cannot change. They're always going to be like this. My life can't change because I'm surrounded by this, this and this, and they're permanent things. You start to see the view of permanence is your enemy here. If you don't maintain a view of permanence, if rather you think things keep changing, then whatever it is that you're undergoing, whatever situation it is that you are in, you can understand this too shall pass. This is not a fixed thing. There is no such thing as a fixed thing in this universe, at least not materially anyway. The position of our sun in the sky keeps changing. The galaxy is moving. The planets are moving. You and I are moving. There's no part of the universe which is not undergoing movement or transformation. When you think that it's not, is when you get yourself into trouble. When you think you should expect certain things tomorrow, this is when you get into trouble. When you expect a person to behave a certain way, this is when you get into trouble. When you expect yourself to be a certain way, this is when you get into trouble. Because you don't allow change. And that's a very rigid mindset. When you get yourself into that, it's a very rigid mindset. And it's easily done. Something doesn't start to go your way, well, I better chuck a tantrum. I better get angry. I better get upset. Because that'll help things change, right? Well, it will. But it's just like spreading, germs and viruses rather than containing them. Allowing your anger, your issues to flood out onto another person's stage and ruin their performance. This is how we tend to react when things don't go our way. But rather than doing that, rather than seeing it from that perspective, why not change it to another perspective? Is everything about this person bad? Is everything wrong about that person? Is everything wrong about my situation? Absolutely everything? If we can change the way we look at a situation, we can find something good. Even in Angulimala, this mass murderer. I appreciate the fact that this guy can chase a chariot. That's amazing. I can't. I'll walk 10 meters and I'll be, I need a break. That's an amazing thing about this guy. I mean, I don't believe it. I think it's just like, a bit of a story in that respect. Let's just say he's a very fit guy who could kill a lot of people. But he's very fit. That's a good thing. Fitness is good. I can have, joy in the fact that this guy can chase after elephants. It's not something I would do or could do. Not right now. Why do I say not right now? Because I haven't given myself the chance to do so. Maybe I can run after elephants. Maybe I can run faster than an elephant. But unless I try, unless I train and get fit, I don't know. So it's so easy, even in that example as I'm giving it to you live, right? Even just there and then, it's easy to sit in that situation and say, I can't do that. Often we tell our children what they can't do. Can I fly, Mum? No. I wonder how the Wright brothers' mother and father felt. Don't allow another person's perceptions or perspectives to limit yours either. Sometimes we surround ourselves with people who are no people. No, that's not possible. No, you can't do this. No, you can't. But that's their perspective. That's how they think about themselves. That's how they think about their situation. Much would be possible. I'm not saying everything is possible, but I would say much is possible if you know how, if you know why. Transformation for Angulimala, probably most of us would say, no. How can a mass murderer then turn around and be a very gentle person? But this is not just a story. Because I personally know somebody in a similar kind of nature, not necessarily a mass murderer. And they changed their life as well. When you start to see how things really are, this is the key. This is the prime for the push to change. When you've got that primer. And usually that primer is something which sometimes suffering is a big primer for people to change their life. Usually it's in very mundane ways. We feel a sore elbow or a sore head and we go to the doctor. We want to get some change to that suffering. So that's a mundane one. But then you might go through spiritual suffering. You get to a point, you're in a relationship and you're married and you think, what am I doing here? Why am I with this person? Maybe earlier on, I had no idea and I just went along with the flow. Society expects this. I just flow along with society. But society won't pay your electric bill. Society doesn't put food on your table. Society doesn't take you off to school to get an education. Society doesn't get you a job. What is this society anyway? If a bunch of people start running off the cliff face into a chasm, would you say, it's society, I better follow society? Would you run along with them?
No.
But we tend to. We tend to follow the norms within that society that we're in. We don't want to stand out and be different. And in Australia, we're not so good sometimes with this. If you seem to be brilliant or you're a high achiever, we'll cut you down. Tall poppy syndrome, they call it in Australia. In America, you're glorified. Interesting how the perspectives change depending on where you are and what kind of society you're living in. But if you're investigating for truth of a situation, what's really happening? When you start to see change, impermanence, then whatever you see to be a failure is actually a building block for your success. If none of us believe this truly, we would never be able to walk. Sometimes we need to be like a child in order to make progress. A baby cannot walk when it first comes out. It's just a blob. It sits on the ground and it messes itself. That's what children do. But then later on they experiment. They want to see the world. They want to investigate it a bit more. They're curious. These are good qualities. Being curious is a good quality. And so they try crawling. And they'll fail the first few times. And then they start to stand. And then they fall over. They stand, fall over, stand, fall over. Then they can stand and maintain that standing posture. Success. Success, of course, after multiple failures. But what the child is doing is learning from every one of those failures. Not saying, oh, I can't stand, I failed once, I fell down, can't try again. If at first you don't succeed, you try again. But there are some things, of course, worth trying again, other things not worth trying again. Marriage, for example, may not be worth trying again. Best, stay single. Second best, be in a happy marriage. Third best, if you're divorced, don't try again. Okay? What are you looking for? What are you searching for? Okay? If you're looking for happiness, maybe some people feel happy in their marriage. They're getting something from that exchange, maybe. Others may not get so much from that exchange. You might feel more like a slave to a master rather than on equal terms within a relationship. And then if that's the case, then it's called abuse. But even in an abusive relationship, there is an opportunity for you to learn. And am I saying stay in an abusive relationship? No. If you've been abused within a relationship of any sort, friendship, marriage or whatever, learn something from that, then move on. The problem is people tend to go back to those things again and again and again. And then that becomes a long-term abuse, not a short-term learning. Okay, I haven't had such a great relationship with person X, but I learned a lot out of that. And I moved on to the next phase of my life, whether that means I get married or not. But you learn from that. And you go, well, that's something that I don't want to see in the next relationship that I have, if you're going to go and find another relationship. You learn from that, you take that, and that becomes a strength. Every time, in very simple ways, you try food, this doesn't suit my taste or my physiology. I get sick if I eat this. You learn from that failure, you don't eat it again, and then you have a successful, healthy constitution. If we are able to see it's possible for things to change and possible for it to go in a good way, all of this failure is then food for wisdom. Every time you try something and it doesn't succeed initially, you're still going to learn something from that process. If your eyes are open, if your ears are open, if your mind is open, you can learn something from anything. what to be avoided, what to be increased or pursued. You can learn both of those things from any situation. Even sometimes you might think a success is a great thing, but actually sometimes it's not. What some people see as a success, the noble ones would see as a failure. You might make a ton of money, but you spend so many hours at work, you forget what your son and daughter's name is. My wife, I think she had a face. That's not success. It is material success. So now I'm looking for the good part of this. Okay? It's material success. You got lots of zeros in your bank account with a number in the front of it. Well done. But when you die, what can you do with it? What do dead people do with all their millions? Nothing. It's like you take the numbers in front of the zeros and that's what you're left with when you die. Just the zeros. Right? You can't take them with you. They're non-transferable. That's what they should have on checks. When you die, none of this is transferable. It would make you think about it, wouldn't it? Not redeemable either. But what is redeemable is your mind. How you think about things. It sets off a chain reaction. The next birth is the result of that chain reaction. So how you're looking after your mind now, whether you can see in a failure, you can see a success for you. I've learned something from this. I've got a list of people, you might be familiar with some of these names. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, James Cameron, Mark Zuckerberg, Tom Hanks, Harrison Ford, Lady Gaga, Tiger Woods. Some of you familiar with these names? These are all people who dropped out of uni. Would you say that they would be successful in their fields? Probably because you know their names, I would say yes. Do you know Jeff the accountant down the road? No, right? Maybe not so successful. The point isn't the fact that they failed at university. The point is they used that as a basis of knowledge and understanding, and then they succeeded. It's not about undergoing a course of training and then you're successful. I have arrived. I have done my degree. I've arrived. The carpenter has got his master carpenter's license. I've arrived. What have you arrived at? A certificate? A piece of paper? An institution has recognized the fact you can play their game? Well, congratulations, you can play a game. I played Monopoly too when I was a child. Sometimes I would win. Sometimes I would lose. Actually, most of the time I probably would lose. Statistically, that's how it is. Especially if you don't play just, by yourself. You play with other people, you're going to lose at some stage. But you can learn from that. Even Monopoly, you learn which real estate's got the highest value. You learn. Don't buy the cheaper stuff first off. You learn all these things from your failures, from your mistakes. And it's the basis for success. These people on this list that I just read out, they weren't successful straight away. But they had the vision that they could succeed and they kept on going. They didn't give up. It wasn't a piece of paper which was going to tell them whether they were successful or not. Their value of their life wasn't dependent upon an institution's recognition. The education institution, societal institutions, business institutions, these places are invested in themselves, not in you. You need to change your perspective to see how every single thing that you interact with in this world has the ability to change your mind for the greater good, for you, in a wholesome way. Just like Angulimala changed his mind, changed the way he lived, transformed himself. He sought out what was true, not what was false. But that journey, his running around after people, was still part of his journey. He still suffered the consequences of that too. People throwing things at him, cutting him open with stones and whatnot. He still suffered, but he learnt from that suffering as well. And then finally, let go. You can't let go unless you recognize change. It's impossible. You might be sitting there feeling a bit depressed about a situation. You feel hopeless. And the reason you feel hopeless is you feel change is impossible. When you recognize change is a constant, everything is changing. If you really understand that, if you really believe that, you won't invest much time in depression. You won't invest much time in anger. Ultimately, full enlightenment, you will invest no time in anger, no time in greed. These things don't pay off at any stage. And you learn that. And this is where your success will come. The more you invest in impermanence and understanding that, realizing it, the more you let go. Whatever is prized to you, this antique bowl worth $6 squillion, to you the most valuable thing in the world. But if you recognize change, this can't be mine forever. If you recognize change, right now, it's rusting. It doesn't rust in 10 years from now, it's rusting now. What should I do with this bowl if I want happiness? Keep holding on to it? Keep thinking it's not going to change? That's the recipe for sadness. That's the recipe for disappointment. That's the recipe for depression. Now, you may not have a bowl, but you might have a husband. And as they get older, they resemble the top of the bowl. Bald, rusty. Their memory is rusty. I remember this. It was wrong. It wasn't like that at all. Because things change. You expect your husband and your wife to remember things? It's crazy. I like to think that I can remember things, and I forget things. I don't have photographic memory. It's not like playing back a video recording of a situation 6 years ago, although we all like to think we've got video-like recording capability. And if you play it back, oh yes, my memory's so good, I know exactly what happened. And then you start fighting with people about something that happened in the past. It's kind of ludicrous. Even if you had a video recording back then of that particular event, what perspective is it going to see? Just one. The camera is not 360 degrees. It only takes a shot from a certain perspective. Anything which is happening from that side of the room, facing back this way, I don't see it. Maybe I'm talking to a person and they're irritated. And I say, you were being irritable because of me. But that's because from what I see, I don't see everything. The camera from behind sees them scratching their backside. I don't see that. They're irritated because there's a boil on their backside. Oh, it's so painful. And I see the painful expression on their face. Oh, like this. Oh, you're irritated with me. My memory's good. But my perspective isn't good. Even if my memory was good, my perspective is limited. I'm only seeing things from a certain perspective. My eyes and my ears pick up only so much. But even the physical sense organs, that's one thing. But then when it gets to perceptions, that's another. How do I interpret this? How many times you have a conversation with somebody, you think they're thinking a certain way or feeling a certain way, only to realize, unfortunately, years after anger and misunderstanding, that it was actually nothing like that. We fight with people and then 2 weeks later, well, if you just let go of that, then we wouldn't have this problem. What do you mean let go of that? I wasn't worried about that. I was thinking about this. And yet we've gone 2-3 weeks, months, sometimes years, our whole lives, holding on to something which actually didn't happen, didn't exist. It was an illusion from the start. But even this you can learn from. Even these mistakes that we made about how other people feel about us, how we feel about other people, that changes and can change if you let it. If you want to hold on to an idea like it's snap frozen in time, well then, of course, it's not going to change for you. You will maintain the same feeling throughout. And suffering will come as a result. If you can take even just that lesson and learn from that, you will be successful in life. you start to see how things really work, then success will come for you. But if you want to snap things frozen in time, you want to go, no, it's going to be like that and it's never going to change, you can't succeed because you can't learn. We learn from our mistakes if we're wise, and we become stronger for it. Friedrich Nietzsche, whatever doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. Words to that effect anyway. I agree, unless it's real, like, you know, really bad pneumonia, because then your lungs after that are pretty bad and it doesn't really make you stronger, it makes you weaker. But generally speaking, philosophically, it holds. If you can survive something, a traumatic relationship, traumatic workplace, whatever it is, if you can survive that, you'll learn from it, it goes into your wisdom bank, and you can draw down on it later on. You'll identify the trends which lead to suffering, and you'll avoid those trends. You'll understand that letting go is something which leads away from the trend of suffering to happiness. Happiness is a result of being able to drop things, not getting involved, not being invested in situations which don't lead to peace and happiness. When you see what leads to peace and happiness, you invest more in that. Letting go, being happy with the present moment, even if it's not what you necessarily desired, but you accept it. Acceptance is a big part. Acceptance of the now is what leads to happiness. If you can do this, all of your failures will then become your strengths. All of your failures will then become successes. That's my talk this morning on failure and how it can lead to success and strength. I open up to the floor for any questions that there may be on the suttas or this morning's chat. Yes. Actually, can we hand the microphone around, please? Just over here. Just wait up for the microphone so everybody can hear. Oh, lost my voice. That's okay. Change. It's all right. Before I know this one works.
It comes to my mind, Bhante, if you have seen the lightning,
Yep.
If you have seen the lightning, you should not be afraid of thunder.
If you have seen the... Oh, now everything's dead. Might have to turn that one off. If you have seen the lightning...
You should not be afraid of thunder.
Still dead. If you have seen the lightning, you should not be afraid of the thunder. Yes. Yep. It's quite true. That's because you can see the cause, right? So lightning comes first and then the thunder comes after. So when you're looking at the cause of things, you can understand the outcome or the results which come as a result of that particular thing. Although intuitively, you probably won't know why a sound comes as a result of a sight. Lightning does not necessarily mean thunder when we first experience it, but we come to experience it over many, many times. We know when there is lightning, there will come the thunder. This is natural. Okay. Any other questions? Or yes?
What will lead to unfavorable outcome? A fixed view or a wrong view?
What will lead to a pointless microphone? Okay. What will lead to a more unfavorable outcome?
Fixed view,
a fixed view or a wrong view? A fixed view is a wrong view. It's a good trick question. Well, the answer is both are wrong views.
I know, but what is relative?
They will both lead to suffering. Wrong view has to lead to suffering.
But wrong can change.
Wrong can change to right view.
Wrong is a relative thing. I mean, there are wrong in
Right and wrong are relative things. Each society, for example, Papua New Guinea, cannibals eat human beings. You think, oh, that's atrocious, but they do that every day. They eat human flesh. So for them, it's fine. For them. But ultimately, is it fine? Causing harm to another being, according to right view, is not fine. Not many beings want to suffer. Not many beings want to die. It's very unpopular. Right? People don't like to die. It's a strange thing. Because we like to have moral experiences in line with our greed, our hatred and delusion. So we want to keep living. So we can have more of those experiences. But what is right and what is wrong? Look at right view. What is right view? There is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There's a way leading away from suffering, and that way is the Eightfold Path. That's right view. So if it's away from right view, wow, miracle. If it's away from right view, then of course it necessarily is wrong view. So the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths is the basis for right view. Does that make sense? Fixed? You could say gravity is a fixed law as well.
Coming from the Sutta, but things change.
Things change, yes. But some principles are maintained regardless of time. And Dhamma is a principle which applies regardless of time. It's like saying gravity, it only applies on Earth. Well, we see instances of gravity applying throughout the galaxy or cosmos or whatever. It maybe in a parallel universe there's the inverse of gravity. Things move away from planets. That would be kind of funky, but terrifying at the same time, especially if you rely upon an atmosphere to survive. We check these things in terms of the principles of the Dhamma. When we're doing this chanting, when we recall the qualities of the Dhamma, well expounded is the Blessed One's Dhamma, to be seen here and now, timeless. It means that the concept, the principle of the Dhamma doesn't change according to time. It's like the law of gravity doesn't change if it's Monday or Wednesday. I'm using a simile. Gravity might change. I'm not a nuclear physicist. I'm not into quantum mechanics to such an extent and understand it that well. Maybe gravity does change. I don't know. I'm just trying to use a simile. But that theory of gravity, for example, will be maintained regardless of whether you're Pluto on Earth or whether you're in Sagittarius. That doesn't change gravity, the concept of gravity. In a similar, not the same, but in a similar kind of way, the concept of the Dhamma is timeless. It doesn't change whether it's 5,000 years ago or whether it's now. When there is greed, hatred and delusion, suffering will follow. That is timeless. Birth leads to old age, sickness and death. This is timeless. I'll ask anybody to counter-argue with that if they want to. Doesn't matter what planet you're on or what universe. Nothing stays the same forever. And on that basis, with birth as condition, old age, sickness and death has to come. If there's no birth, by virtue of that, then there is no old age, sickness and death. This is timeless. And this is also a right view. Hopefully that answers that question. No? It's good. Good-o, yep.
And I just wonder in today's context, if someone has got a criminal record, like Mala,
Yep.
would he be allowed to be a monk?
If you have a criminal record, you can become a monk as long as you've served your sentence and you're not in prison anymore. Like you break out and then hey, I want to ordain, and the cops are still trying to chase you down. We can't ordain you. You have to be free from government service, free from debt, and also from government service also implies being in the criminal system.
So is that the precepts handed down by Buddha?
The Buddha said for ordination.
Then why did he do the different for Angulimala?
He wasn't arrested. He was a murderer, yes, but he wasn't arrested. He wasn't under state care at that time. Yeah.
How did Angulimala die?
How did he die?
Yeah, I wonder.
The heart stops beating?
No. Yeah. There's so many lives.
I don't... That's okay. I'm just being cheeky. I don't recall in the suttas anywhere where...
He was thrown at,
Yep.
beaten up, that sort of things. I wonder whether he died in that kind of miserable...
We don't know.
All right. Yeah.
You know, maybe he was murdered by somebody else. Well, we don't know. It's silent. The suttas are silent on that particular point. Yeah.
Like the other disciple, was it something?
Devadatta.
Moggallana.
Mahamoggallana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently beaten to death. I say apparently because only the commentaries speak about that. The commentaries say all sorts of interesting things, but not from the Buddha's mouth. And Moggallana died before the Buddha died, so the Buddha would be able to talk about I would think the Buddha would mention such an atrocious thing had it really happened. I think it's a story. I don't think it's actually true story. Yeah. You got to think, somebody like Mahamoggallana, foremost in psychic powers, could disappear here, reappear there, gets beaten by robbers. What, did he teleport three feet away? Point, point. Oh, they're still here. And 3 times. Of course, things always have to happen 3 times in stories, especially fairy tales. Yeah. So I don't believe that Mahamoggallana was beaten up to something the size of a grain of rice and then reassembled psychically and went to the Buddha and said, I'm off now. Why would you allow yourself to be beaten up when you have such psychic powers? It's bad karma for the people who beat you up. I'm an arahant. Some guy's trying to beat me up. I'll say, oh, out of compassion. Compassion for no one. Not for this body because it's going to suffer pain. Not for this person because he's going to go to hell for beating up an arahant. You're too harmless. No, that's crazy. It's a crazy story. It's crazy from beginning, middle and the end. It's crazy in all aspects, so I don't pay attention. It wouldn't be out of character if the unicorn turned up and a leprechaun turned up and Zeus and had a cup of tea with him. That would be in line with that story because it's all crazy anyway. Why not? I don't pay attention to commentarial stories too much. Maybe it's true, but it's not from the Buddha's mouth. It loses authority for me. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Fantastic. You're all great students because you've got no questions. So I don't expect any of you to be unhappy from here on in. Taking it's uncertain. No, you're also good students. You'll be fine. So using failures as progress. Okay, failure is a progress. Just keep that in mind. If you learn from it, it's a progress. Okay, you can progress. All right. So now it's 10:47, and we have lunch next door. It's free, if there's enough, because we rely upon people to bring food. So whatever you bring, it's over there to share, and you're welcome to join us right now. If you have some questions that you want to ask me, you've got 12 minutes of time before lunch starts at 11 over there. Most welcome to join us, and have a great weekend. I'll be back in this area of the world more regularly on May 31st. I'll be away for a while teaching overseas and going interstate, New South Wales and Western Australia over the next 3 months. So you generally won't see me. I'll be back here for the AGM, but it's like I'm only here for a day and then off, something like that, or 2 days. All right, so in the meantime, whilst I'm away, have fun, enjoy yourselves, as long as it's in line with the Dhamma, and I might see you on the 31st of May or afterwards, only if conditions support it, and not a second before. Okay. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye. Oh, hang on, message. April 10 I will be here. Yes, I'm giving a talk on April 10. I'll be here, April 10. Okay, thank you for the reminder. Yep.